Glorious front end lock, something I know all of you guys just absolutely adore, but that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video right here. So, front end lock, if you don't really know what it is or what causes it or what the problem is with it or anything like that, I'm just going to kind of go through and explain my thoughts on it and kind of my opinions on it and what they could change with it and stuff like that, because it is a fairly big problem in this game, and I think that it's one of those things that makes it feel a lot not like real life. So if you don't know, front end lock is basically whenever you run into the back of somebody and it's like God just took control of your front wheel and it just falls over and you have absolutely no chance of trying to save it, or it falls over, it locks your front end up. And one really crazy thing about it that I found is if you go in there and start adjusting on your vertical springs and your forward springs and stuff like that, I mean, I can just change that in the slightest and it'll go from me barely tapping somebody and it just locking the front end up and falling down, and me being able to just bounce off everybody like a ping pong ball. So there's something kind of jacked up in there with the way that you can set the bike up, and in reality that shouldn't affect the collision at all. Your setup should not affect how the front end locks up and dives into the ground. But I think the problem is whenever you run into the back of somebody and it sort of like initiates the front end lock, I think it's actually lowering some setup setting out there, and it's causing you to not be able to actually handle the bike, because it's like you totally lowered off your roll damping or something, in that advanced stability like totally goes to zero, because I mean you cannot control it. You know what I mean? It goes down, dude. Like you do not have a chance of saving it most of the time, and there's a lot of weird things where it'll, like, after you've ran into the back of somebody, 2 or 3 seconds later, then it'll roll down. It's so finicky, dude. And I mean, we never get through a first corner in a pro race without somebody going down. And this is a simulator, man. I feel like that's one thing they should have down packed, is the actual collision. I think Reflex's collision blows MX Simulator out of the water at this point. I mean, Reflex is awesome, dude. Like, you can push on people, you can rub up against people, you can actually race. Reflex may be a little bit arcadey, but I feel like Simulator, it's just like, I mean, you can't even hardly race, you know what I mean? It's like, when you're trying to pass somebody on a supercross track, if they don't basically sort of like kind of scoot out of your way, I mean, somebody's going to crash unless you just pass them on a straight whoop section, or, you jump over them or something like that. If you're like coming on the inside of somebody and you're trying to just do a little, friendly, like kind of slightly bump them, little love tap, and then come out of the corner, I mean, 9 times out of 10, somebody's going to crash out of that. And that's just not realistic. I mean, it's too much, It ought to be a very, if you run right into the back of somebody, I feel like that should be something where it just gives you a slight little hit, and then you have full control instantly. And that's something that Brian Haskell was talking about. He was saying that's how it should be, and I believe that same way. I feel like, it should be a slight loss of control in the handlebars, just slightly, just for a split second. And as it is right now, it seems like it's like a 2 or 3 second loss of control. So you're like on this uncontrollable rickety skateboard that you're trying to keep balanced, and oh man, it's just frustrating as hell, because crashes in this game, I mean, that is the whole game once it gets to the pro level. I mean, crashing and actually dismounting off of the bike, that'll make a pro look like an amateur, or an amateur look like a pro when it comes to how much you crash in a pro race. I mean, it changes everything. So I don't know how JLV is going to fix that. I know they've kind of been back and forth with a couple different things when it comes to the actual collision, and the collision itself does feel better than it once did, but they still have a front end lock issue with that. So And my only big problem with it is the fact that just simply going in there and changing one little setup thing, like changing it by 10 clicks, can seriously make it go from being like it just locks your front wheel up and you fall down. You have zero chance of saving it. Or you being able to hit somebody running 60 miles an hour and just bounce off of them like a ping pong ball, and you can save it every time. And so it almost eliminates and forces you to run that certain setup if you don't want to fall down, when you're sitting there just bumping handlebars and stuff. And especially at a low speed, that's where it really should not completely take over your front wheel. And I know there's been some issues with kind of how the suspension was, where with the latest update where they changed all that, where you could be running 5 miles an hour, jump off a 5-foot double, and your feet would pop off of the bike and you would dismount. It was like the silliest thing. So what JLV did is he went in there, he didn't change it for all speeds, he just changed the ratio, at which you would fully dismount at casing or coming up flat on something at less than 5 miles an hour or something like that. So I think if they would go in there and do something similar, because usually that's when you have those dumb fall down moments. I mean, you're running 2 miles an hour fast in the corner and you're both just barely moving, and then it just takes control of the front wheel, when you're actually got a pretty good little speed going and you're bouncing off of each other, it seems like you can kind of control it better at that point when you've got more speed with it. Maybe that's just me that feels that way, but yeah, definitely a humongous problem in MX Simulator. You're scared to even attempt to get in any sort of contact with anybody. I mean, you just don't get in those fun, bouncing off of each other's handlebars kind of races. Even if both people are really, really good at the game and have great control over the bike, if you don't have your suspension set up that certain way, I'm telling you, it's like a groundhog popped out of the ground and grabbed your front wheel. You cannot do anything. There's a certain level there where you can't fight it. You know what I'm saying? You can't save it. If you have a certain setup there. But that's the weird thing I noticed was just simply changing my setup. And I can understand if, let's say, you go from 100 stability to 0 stability, and then it all of a sudden kind of feels like you're locking the bike up. That's one thing, okay? But I'm talking we're running off of a general basis of how most pro suspension setups are and stuff. Most people have it pretty close to 0 stability, and stuff like that. But I mean, you can go in there and change something 10 clicks. One thing, 10 clicks, and it totally changes the way the collision feels in the game. I mean, it's just it makes you scratch your head, because personally, I just don't feel like the collision properties and the front end lock properties should have anything to do with your setup. I feel like, as long as you're at least within that 10 to or 15 to 0 stability, everybody's front end lock and actual collision should be identical. You know what I'm saying? Now, if you have full-blown handicap 100 stability, then it may do some finicky things at that point. But what I'm saying is, if you don't have really any of those handicap beginner type things on, then it should be a baseline, base level sort of collision properties that you have. You shouldn't be able to go in there and change one little thing 10 clicks and it totally change, the collision in that sense. And I think some people may not understand that, how, you can go in there and simply just change one little thing and it totally changes the way the collision of the bike feels. Totally. And it's kind of frustrating because it's I just don't like that. I don't like the thought of that. It should not be affected by your actual setup. And I don't know the answer for that. I mean, I don't make motocross games, you know. I don't know the answer. And I don't know what you would do mechanically to actually fix that. I mean, I have no idea. And obviously JLV has made the game to this point, so you have a lot of confidence in him that he will get it figured out, but I think it would be nice for him to have some pros in there actually testing it with these actual advanced setups and stuff, and so that it's actually basing it a little more from somebody that's going that wicked speed and having collision often and doing all that. It's one thing to just go into a random online server and, you know, bump into a couple of your buddies for 2 seconds, but when you go into the first corner with 22 pros, like, that's when you gotta get that collision dialed in properly, because that it makes a humongous difference. I mean, everybody just plops over like a freaking walrus and you can't even ride. You know, you can't even get out of the first corner. I mean, it's life or death out of the first corner. It really is. And it just shouldn't be that like touchy where it just rips the front end out from under you. I mean, it shouldn't be that extreme. It really shouldn't. But anyways, that's my opinion on it. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. And anyways, I'll see you guys on the next video. Later, dudes.